for attending this evening's meeting, and we'll call it to order. It is meeting of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Regional Planning Committee. It is Monday, June 22nd, 2026 at 7 p.m., and we are meeting this evening via Zoom teleconference. I'll ask that Vicky do the roll call, please.
Sure. I see that people are still coming in, so I'll read what I have thus far and try and catch everybody here. I just saw Stephanie. Okay. So I'm going to read members first, and then I will seat any alternates as needed, and then read off the alternates in attendance. So I have Rebecca Mead from Chester, Nick Demetriadis from Cromwell. I have Frank DeFelice from Durham, Michael Kowalczyk from East Hampton, Debbie Langdon from East Haddam, Thomas Pinkowish from Essex, Alec Martin from Killingworth, Ray Fusco from Lyme, Beth Emery from Middletown, Howard Margulies from Old Lyme, Doug McCracken from Old Saybrook, Bill Neal from Westbrook. I am sitting Debbie Langdon and Ray Fusco as alternates. And I also am seeing Anthony LaCava and Stephanie Warren and Michael Riggio. Am I missing anybody? Okay, for staff, Sam Gold, Executive Director of RiverCOG, Susie Beckman, Kevin Armstrong, and myself, Vicki Harris.
All right. And for the record, we received a late notice from Mary Stone that the contingent from Lyme will not be able to attend this evening because they're working on their zoning amendments to correspond with 25-1, the regulation. So appreciate that notice. And with that, we have the alternates seated, and we can utilize a motion to adopt the agenda. Thank you, Bill. Is there a second to Bill's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Beth. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? I declare the motion passed, which brings us to item number 5, public comment. Members of the public, this is your opportunity to speak. You have the floor, so this is your time to speak. I don't see any members of the public. Vicky, do you have any?
I do not see any now.
All right. With that, public comment going once, twice, 3 times. We'll move on to item number 6, approval of the minutes of our past meeting. These should have been in your packet that you received from Vicky. If you need a minute to take a look at that, we can certainly accommodate that.
Move they be approved as presented.
Thank you very much, Bill. Is there a second to Bill's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Beth. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining?
I have to abstain. I wasn't at the last meeting.
Thank you, Nick. Is there any others? Any others abstaining? Okay. Duly noted. Thank you, Nick. And Maurice Fowles in the meeting. I see that. Good. Okay. And with that, I declare the motion passed. And we will move on to referrals. Sam, who will be giving us an update on the referrals now?
Susie will.
Susie, floor is yours.
Oh, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. So the big update is that 9 towns sent referrals for their text and map amendments in order to comply with PA 25-1. That was Wallingford and Rocky Hill as abutting. The RiverCOG region sent theirs to us. Middletown, Clinton, Old Saybrook, Deep River, Chester, Clinton, Portland, and Old Lyme all submitted them and received letters. Five other referrals came in, not related to PA 25-1. One was from Deep River that had 2 different items on it. One was an adjustment to ADUs, increasing the floor area allowed. The second was a solid waste and recycling facilities change to ensure that any of these facilities are located at least 250 feet from a residential lot. And Old Saybrook sent a referral about a text amendment to make off-street parking in the Saybrook Point district a permitted use on a lot abutting a lot occupied by a principal use.
Okay. And Susie, oh, go ahead, Susie.
And then Old Saybrook was had another one to create a marine redevelopment district in the Ferry Point area, which was specific to a couple of it's an overlay that can lay on a couple of lots, specific lots in that area. And then Essex had a text amendment to allow dance studios in the residential life care district. I'll take any questions, if anyone has questions or concerns, I'll hear them.
So, Susie, my understanding is that both Middlefield and Durham presented their revisions to the RiverCOG as far as the 25-1 changes to their regulations.
These, what I'm reporting on since May 21, so May 22 on. I don't know if they did them sooner. I didn't see them in our list. They may have done them earlier, and we would have responded earlier. I only looked at everything since May 22.
Yeah, they would have come in June.
Okay.
So that explains that. Okay, just checking. All right, any other comments or questions for Susie? Comments or questions on any referrals? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Susie, and thank you for running through that quickly. As part of the item number 8, the 2026 legislative session wrap up, Susie, I think you're going to present that as well. But then we have a very interesting PowerPoint that was prepared by Sam, and we're going to go into that. So, Susie, go ahead and kick this off.
Oh, you're muted, Susie.
You have to. Yeah,
apologies. I talk to myself all the time, but now I'd like you to hear me. I won't take up a lot of time. A document was sent to you. It's one page. It lays things out in a grid as if in an Excel document about the proposed legislation that may come back next year with information that if there was a letter sent by RiverCOG, that's included with a link, and also whether or not it was opposed or supported by RiverCOG. So you have that information in your packet. Vicki also sent it this afternoon. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer any questions about that, and we can talk offline if that's better.
All right. Does anyone have any questions or comments for Susie regarding the 2026 legislative session wrap up?
Susie, I think you mentioned a letter. I think the only thing that I received is the 2026 proposed housing legislation expected to return as the title. Is there a letter that I'm missing?
No, there are links to the letter in the letters that were sent as
you mean the testimonies?
Correct. Sorry,
Okay.
the testimony. All
right, I got it now. Thanks.
Letter was too general a word. So the testimony that was signed and sent by RiverCOG, made by Sam. Those letters are all linked, or that testimony is all linked in that document.
Very well.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Beth. And Debbie, you have your hand raised, so go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to give the group a heads up on a bill that did pass. So it's in the chat if you want to take a look at it, and then if anybody wants to comment on it later when it's appropriate.
All right. Thank you, Debbie. Appreciate the comments. Thanks for submitting that also. All right. Are there any other comments or questions before we turn it over to Sam for his PowerPoint presentation?
Can I make a comment, please?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
So have you sent these bills that you would that you have indicated you support to any of the legislation, our reps in our area, senators in our area? So they're all aware of that.
So we have been sending them to legislators on the committees, um, typically, but we have not made a practice of flooding all the legislators in our region with every bill, every te letter testimony letter we write. Um, but I guess that could be a practice that we take up for the next session. Um, we do invite all of our region's legislators to a meeting, typically in December or January, where we go over the major priority items for the COG with the legislators, and we invite them for lunch usually. Um, we can sometimes have good turnout, but usually it's middling turnout. Other years we've gone up to the Capitol and bought them breakfast. That didn't seem to work even. That didn't seem to work very well. But this is a pet peeve of the first selectman, of course, that there isn't seemingly the responsiveness to by the legislators who represent our towns from us. So,
All right.
but we do make it that one thing we do is we do provide we have a live spreadsheet that we during the legislative session we circulate to our CEOs, we circulate to the RPC. We could circulate that to our legislators just to say, hey, here are the bills that we're tracking, and including in that spreadsheet is a link to the testimony that we submit. So if you want to know about bills that are of interest to your first selectman, your towns, here's a good listing. So I think Marie, you put a good issue that maybe we could do better for next year.
Yeah, it wasn't intended to be criticism. It's just as
Oh,
we know, they're running every 2 years, and so now's the time to hit them over the head, really, to say this is what we want you to support.
Yeah, very
thank you.
well. Nicely
Thank you.
put. Thank you, Marie. All right. Any other comments or questions? Bill, do you have your hand up, or is that my? Oh, no, it's my mouse. I'm sorry. All right. Very well. Then we will move on to Sam's presentation. Go ahead, Sam. You can kind of describe what you're going to talk about and then go into it.
So Vicky, can you allow me to share my screen or make me a co-host? Oh, a send request. Send a request. All right, I can share now. All right, let me share my PowerPoint. So there's a story behind this, and I'll get into that. Um, I oh, I just realized it's the wrong date. Anyway, please ignore the 2025 date. Um, so I had written testimony strongly against this bill, which was House Bill 5502. It was a bill that was supported by the majority leader, and it would add some industrial land to the definition of where by right middle housing could be built. If you remember, now middle housing between 2 to 9 units uh, can be in any commercial district or any mixed use district. And the effective date of that is July 1st. So that's why all of the planning and zoning are update their zoning, because they want to put site plan standards in there for such applications. This bill would have added to all the commercial land and all of the mixed use land. It would add some of the industrial lands. Um, I had criticized this. It came up at a meeting, legislative update meeting of the Connecticut chapter of the APA, which was attended by one of the staffers of Majority Leader Rojas. And I got an invitation to present to the Majority Leader about specifically about this bill, because this bill is a bill that they intend to bring back next year. And so the bill would have allowed middle housing and mixed use residential development by summary review, which is really a by right process on all land zoned industrial. And the caveats would be provided such lot is not greater than 1,000 feet from a transit station or a highway, or was previously zoned for residential use at any time subject only summary review as defined in section 8-R2. So I went through, so this is the PowerPoint I created to walk through the issues here. And I think this is important because it will come back. First, there's no differentiation between intensity and noxiousness of industrial uses allowed or already present. So you could have a rendering plant and have residential next to it, or you could have something that's light industrial and very quiet and doesn't do very much. So there's no differentiation of intensity of the industrial use, but it will create new land use conflicts for which zoning was originally created to avoid, to keep people safe from negative health and safety impacts of industry, chemical, sound, smells, traffic, and allow business to operate without complaints of residential neighbors. Summary review, health and safety revision could also be used to deny all residential use in most eligible industrial districts. So I pointed out to the majority leader that the only difference in summary review and by right is this additional call out for health and safety. So a planning and zoning commission could just say, well, we deny it summary review because of health and safety concerns. And then you sort of created by creating this new summary review process, you created a way of denying most of these applications. Um, uh, uh, Debbie? Oh, you're muted.
To accentuate your point, I guess, which is an excellent point. If you look in the headlines with how the new data centers are affecting nearby residential areas, the water quality, the water usage, and so on. So this kind of dovetails into what you're talking about.
Well, speaking of data centers, which I don't think we'll have to worry about here because our electricity is too expensive and our property, we would tax the servers as personal property. So I don't think we're going to get them. But the big issue is sound. They can be
And
very,
water.
yeah,
The water is coming out black.
but
In some places it's polluted. So yeah, their lawsuits now started up on impact and bypasses of local zoning and so forth. So it's become a cluster, and I think they're proposing one near Millstone because they do need large sources of power. But they do like to sprinkle smaller data centers, saying, "Oh, they're not as bad as the big ones." So there
yeah,
are
well,
smaller ones in Connecticut.
and that could be considered industrial use. So that thank you for that. So I then go on to sort of parse this through. So it talks about not greater than 1,000 feet from a transit station. Well, that section of the statute includes any train station or bus rapid transit station that is built or scheduled for funding, or the Department of Transportation has initiated planning. And I pointed out to the majority leader that Connecticut DOT has initiated planning for a number of new train stations on, like, let's say, Shoreline East to Westerly, Rhode Island, or a new Milford train station, and bus rapid transit stops. However, few are actually funded. So there's lots of plans for lots of additions, but this is not a good definition. This is not a good statutory reference because a plan that talks about a new station is not the same thing as a new station. And also, I pointed out that most of our industrial land is along rail corridors because not too long ago, when that industrial land was probably first developed, rail was the primary mode of moving freight in this country. So you find our industrial land predominantly around rail corridors. And a lot of those rail corridors occasionally have a train station. So, and many times that industrial land, those industrial warehouses and uses were there first. Next is the definition of highway. So that includes all interstates, expressways, and major state routes. These roads are typically the roads designed for the most and the heaviest traffic. Truck traffic, by and large, should stay off local streets as much as possible to minimize traffic, road wear and tear, and to protect user safety. You really want the heaviest trucks to be on the biggest roads. You don't want them on the local streets. And also, the major state roads are most likely to have bridges, culverts, and road geometries that can best accommodate truck traffic. Recent growth in warehouse development has been driven by easy truck access to interstates, and these locations are some of the most desirable for new industry. So I pointed out that, that if you're, 1,000 feet of a major state road and you're going to prioritize that for now residential, that's a problem because those are also prime locations for business. And then the final item, the final thing was that zoning started in Connecticut in 1924. And so based on how you read this third item, but was previously zoned for residential use at any time. If housing was allowed in the 1930s and then subsequent in the 1960s, this area was rezoned for industrial, someone could assert that housing should be allowed again. That's a little crazy. Businesses should have certainty that they're not going to, if they invest in their plant or invest in their business, then they're not going to have residential neighbors who will then complain them out of business. Um, it all depends on how this is read. It could be subject only to summary review. So really, it could only be backward looking to the special session, maybe, or July 1st of this year. But it really depends on the reading of what that really means. And and the reality is that human safety should be prioritized over business operations. And in that scenario, the business operations may be forced to leave and lose. I pointed out to the majority leader that, residents vote, businesses don't. And he argued that point to me. It's like, well, the business owner might vote. Well, what about a corporation? What if that business owner doesn't live in that town? And if it is a single owner, that's one vote, and the residences next to his or her factory are going to be multiple. So, really the business doesn't vote. They can make political contributions, but they don't really vote. And he didn't want to see that point. So, if industrially zoned land provides a good opportunity for residential development without the risk of creating conflicts, the proper process is to use the municipal planning and zoning process to rezone the land into another zoning district that allows residential uses. That was my point to the majority leader and his staff. Blanket state zoning undermines deliberation and consideration of facts that may or may not support a change. It circumvents public involvement, particularly of neighbors, businesses, owners, or residents. And it stymies planning for infrastructure and transportation because you would want to focus your infrastructure to where you think different types of uses are going to be. And now, if the residential can be an industrial or vice versa, it messes that all up. And it also makes locating a business in Connecticut even more difficult than it already is. Businesses have no certainty that they won't be driven out by future residents. So, looking at, zoning in Connecticut, vast majority of the land in Connecticut is zoned for residential uses. Between 5 to 15% of land is zoned for commercial or mixed use, and a very small percent, probably about 3% on average, and in our region is 1.5%, is zoned for industrial. So it's a very small percentage of our land is set aside for industrial uses. And by and large, our industrial land is kind of scattered. There's not a lot of it, and we're not making more. When industrial becomes something else, it's very difficult to take that back. You can't, it's very difficult, to go backwards and add more industrial land. It can happen, but it's not. You're once again, the businesses don't vote; the residents do. And so, impacts of the bill affects a small amount of very economically valuable land in the state. Housing can permanently displace industry. Neighbor complaints about safety and disturbances will drive out businesses.
Right.
And after the Kelo decision in 2005, in New London, converting residential land into new business or industrial land is really politically impossible or unfeasible. Already incredibly difficult to locate a new business in Connecticut, in addition to other disadvantages we face like high taxes and high utility rates. And it continues to shift the burden of property tax over to residents from businesses. So I made a reference to the State Plan of Conservation Development, which was approved last year. It prioritized growing manufacturing in Connecticut and employment in manufacturing, which runs counter to this bill. Approximately 3% of land in Connecticut is zoned for industrial use. One anecdotal story was our bus company, River Valley Transit, is struggling to find a location for a modest bus garage somewhere along the shoreline. We're looking for a relatively small parcel of land to house us like a small fleet of buses, and we're having trouble finding that because most of the land that's available has environmental constraints, wetlands, flooding, some other reason why it hasn't been developed. And overall, there's no statewide coordination of industrial land with the overall goal of promoting business development in the state. It's town by town, city by city. But the example that comes back when I've pushed back on this bill was examples of light industrial residential and this idea that modern industry is quieter, doesn't have the pollution, doesn't have the emissions. It could be a good neighbor to residential use. And I did some research as to examples of these types of districts. And the city of Denver was probably one of the first to have one. Back in 2010, they did a huge overhaul of their zoning code where they put in form-based code, where they had designated building envelopes and uses based on sort of the scale of the buildings that they were proposing for different neighborhoods. And they created a mixed-use industrial district. Also around the same time, there was a very famous paper on innovation districts that was published in 2014. Denver created a detailed zoning district that envisions light industrial centers with residential commercial uses. And the idea was that these mixed-use industrial districts would be a buffer between the heavy industrial zones, which are the IA and IB zones, where residential uses are prohibited. And the idea here was it was going to protect that heavy industry by being a buffer. And let me show you an example of the Denver zoning code. So just let me get this open. Just one second. Oh yeah, here it is. So this is no, this is not. That is not it. Nope, that is for later. Let me just give me one more second, and I will find. Oh, here it is. And so here's from the Denver, Colorado zoning code. So so the general purpose of this district is, let's see if I can make it bigger.
If you can zoom in a little bit, keep going.
Yeah. Yeah,
More.
is that good?
Oh, that's better.
Yeah, a little more.
Okay. So right, industrial mixed district, industrial mixed use districts are intended to develop a pedestrian-oriented pattern with buildings built up the street and active street level. Industrial mixed-use districts are also intended to provide transition between mixed-use areas and the heavy industrial districts. And the industrial mixed-use districts accommodate a variety of industrial, commercial, civic, and residential uses and encourage affordable housing. So they have versions with 3 stories, 5 stories, 8 stories, and 12 stories. And this district is intended to be an employment area containing office, business, and light industrial uses that are generally compatible with adjacent residential or mixed-use commercial zone districts. No new residential uses may be established in the IA, which is one of the heavy industrial zones. And accordingly, IA zone areas serve as a land use buffer between more residential districts and other general industrial. Let's see. So we'll go down the code. So in the code, they allow for townhouses in this mixed use industrial zone, and their code is very detailed. I'll point out that the city of Denver has more planners working for it than all of Connecticut does. They're only a city of about 750,000. But it's because they have such a detailed code where everything is by right, because you just have to follow the code, which is incredibly detailed. And so they have renderings of what the townhouses would look like, what the setbacks would be, what the heights would be. Really attractive in the Denver code. And talking about 38-foot maximums, the different setbacks, the coverages, different design elements, and then they show what the industrial buildings could look like as well in these districts. And then they show the step backs from these historic bungalows from industrial to I think they did a really good job. This is from June 25th, 2010. So a good 16 years on this. And what happened? So I'm going to go back to my presentation. Well, so I have a friend who's a planner who worked on that 2010 code and still works at the city of Denver. Well, what happened was that district failed, and they're now undoing it. And what they saw in Denver is that development has been 100% residential and failed to support any job creation. So they're now working to reimagine what this district could be because no industrial located there. There's all residential. And it failed as a buffer from adjacent heavy industrial zones, and it failed as that transition district. Well, why did it fail? Well, if you look at like the economics behind development, the value added of residential is in the residential structure. So one-time short-term financial gain for contractors and developers. You do have a potential of long-term wealth growth if housing becomes more valuable, more expensive for the housing owners, and you have permanent public service expenses. Property taxes in many cases don't cover expenses, and budgets fail in referendums. We're seeing that across Connecticut. The value added of industrial is really the product created inside the structure. There's, industrial buildings typically are a commodity. They're concrete, they're steel structures. They're not the money isn't being made on that building. It's being made on the economic processes that are happening inside. The value added processes happening inside the building. So typically with industrial production, you have net increases in income, business, sales, and property tax revenues. And you also might have opportunities for tax increment financing for infrastructure to support those businesses, to support, let's say, a sewer extension or road improvements. So, so I presented that to the majority leader. I then went into a different tangent, which is housing trends in Connecticut. We've seen, we've heard a lot about the housing crisis in Connecticut, but I wanted to look at something that was very specific into industrial land. Industrial land is typically where you find employment and jobs and employers. And so I wanted to look at how Connecticut was doing on job growth in comparison to housing. And if you look from 1990 to 2025, you'll see that, nationally, we added 50%, into our housing stock. But Connecticut only added about 17.41%. So that's not surprising to anyone. We've been trailing in housing growth. That's the story we've been hearing, and it's true. We have been trailing in housing growth. But if you look at job trends, we've also been trailing in jobs. And whereas we added 17% in housing units, we only added about 5.5% in jobs. So we're adding housing units much faster than we are adding jobs in the state. And we actually had declines. Well, the decade of the 2000s, the Great Recession, there was a national decline in employment, but Connecticut had a worse decline. And we also had a decline in the 2010s in Connecticut, whereas the nation as a whole recovered from the Great Recession. In the last 5 years, we haven't been doing as bad. The nation as a whole has grown 11.6% in jobs. We've grown about 9.3%. So we're trailing the nation, but doing a lot better. But overall, whereas the country has added about 44.6%, 4.7%, we've only added 5.5% new jobs in the last 35 years. So if you start looking at this against other states, Connecticut is a huge outlier. For every job we added in that 35-year period, for every one job, there was over 2.5 new housing units added to the landscape. The next worst state is Maine, with 1.62. And Hawaii, their economy has not been the greatest, 1.58. South Carolina is interesting, but I think that has a lot to do with the retirees moving to South Carolina. So retirees are not taking up jobs in the South Carolina economy, but they're taking up housing units. Michigan, another Rust Belt state. Rhode Island's very similar. So you'll see that, it's even with these other states, we are still well above. And the national trend has been there's been a 1.03 housing units for every job added. So nationally there's some parity. If a job created, a housing unit is created, sort of to house that person. But if you look at the other end, these are the states which some of which you think of when you think of the housing crisis in the country. Look at Massachusetts. For every job they've added to their economy, they've only added a little over 0.8 of a housing unit. The worst was actually North Dakota, and this is driven by the shale oil boom up in North Dakota, which drove a lot of employment there, and they had a big bubble of employment. But you look at California, you look at Utah, Massachusetts, they were adding far less than a whole housing unit for every job. And in those places, there has been great increases in housing price just because of the scarcity. So, what's happening in Connecticut? Well, housing growth is being driven by demographic changes, not by job or population growth. This is not a surprise to us. Our economy is not really growing. Our population isn't really growing. We have smaller households and aging population, and that population needs more housing units. Um, and that's really what's driving it here. But the problem is roughly the same number of workers are being housed in more housing units using more land. So that's driving growth in public services expenses without really the same growth in tax revenues you would see if people were getting more income, more salaries, there was a larger employment base to be taxed for income tax. So you end up in a financial spiral of higher taxes, and then those higher taxes discourage job creation because you're less likely to locate in Connecticut because of the high tax structure. So in general, housing shortage in other parts are being driven by housing not keeping up with job growth. In Connecticut, job growth is not keeping up with housing growth. And that is a worst case scenario because it stymies public investment that can encourage both housing and business development. So, if your budget referendum is going down, you're not going to be able to bond to build a new industrial park. Or it's less likely you're able to get that passed. That's one. That's I think one of the issues we're seeing here in Connecticut. So, what can be done? Encourage planning and zoning that encourages housing development in the right places and preserves locations for businesses. What was interesting was that many states actually have strong protections for industrial land. They know how difficult it is to locate businesses, that they actually have strong protections that would sort of prevent abutters or prevent conversion of that land into other uses to preserve these locations for industry. Create a coordinated industrial lands plan for the state that prioritizes and markets industrial land for development. So we found out that the state has a strategic manufacturing plan, and not once does it talk about the availability of land. There's no discussion about us actually having a strategy for having parcels of the right size with the right attributes to attract business or to facilitate business growth. Integrate planning efforts to make sure that housing, economic development, workforce, education, transportation, and environment are taken into consideration together, otherwise known as a good planning. Appreciate that silos can be counterproductive. And strengthen the municipal POCD process, but also require that you follow it. Because in a good POCD, you're taking all these things into consideration. But I pointed out to the majority leader that you can write the best POCD in the world, but you don't actually have to implement it in your zoning. So, and I told them we don't need more standalone plans like the housing growth plan. We just need to take what we already create more seriously. And then improve existing land use processes to avoid obstruction, not to preclude public involvement. And I had he took issue with the housing growth plans that the towns have to create do not require public involvement, and a town may hold a public hearing, but they don't have to. And I pointed out that for a AICP certified planner in Connecticut, it would be unethical for them to participate in a plan that doesn't have any public involvement. Part of our code of ethics is we're not government. We shouldn't be working on plans where the people who we're planning for have no role in the process or any influence over the outcomes. And I joked with the majority leader that as much as you might want to live in a command economy where with benevolent planners, I don't think we're ready to give up on democracy. And he chuckled and he kind of pulled back, but he was the issue was well, there's NIMBYs. Well, just because you have public involvement and just because you have a public hearing doesn't mean that that people can come out and have their say. But I pointed out also that Connecticut is we're known nationwide for our municipal our mayors have gone to jail or there being corruption in the municipal government, and that sunlight is the best disinfectant for that. And you could very easily see how someone could cut a deal and without any public involvement or public hearings, something could get passed that is not on the up and up. So he did relent on that point a little bit. Um, but then, and then this was the end of my presentation to the majority leader. I then asked the question, so why are you doing this? Like, why do you need to bring this back? Like, what is so important here? And his staff had mentioned this when at this Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association event, and then they reinstated it. They restated it, and it's because share the screen. It's because a representative who represents the town of Wilton either I think owns land or knows of land in her town that is zoned industrial, and she thinks it's a good idea to put housing there. And so I just responded um, to them, and I said, if this representative or any person has an issue, they should be talking to their town planner. They should be talking to their planning and zoning commission. If there's a problem in the planning and zoning commission process, address that in statute. But just because someone has a piece of land doesn't mean you change the zoning for every town and city in Connecticut. And they agreed that yeah, that's not necessarily the best public policy, but they were unembarrassed to say that this representative is the origin of it because she has land that she wants to put housing on. So so that was my conversation. I will be following up with Representative Rowe specifically on this one point that that I think this bill that was pushed and will be brought back next session most likely is not necessary. And the reason is that as part of this housing growth plans, there is an assessment of land that's supportive of residential development. And if there's attributes of land that is currently zoned industrial that, based on the attributes should be rezoned, that should come out in this process. And there should be a process to have a discussion as to, where are the best places to put new where are the areas that are most conducive to residential development, and and then to follow up with that with rezoning. That is the correct process. So, so that's the feedback I'm going to give him in a follow-up. But I thought this would be an interesting presentation to give to you, especially considering that you asked to know what would be coming up next session. So I saw that Debbie had her hand raised. So I'm done with my presentation.
Well, thank you, Sam, for preparing that presentation and for sharing it with us. This is always a tough thing but at least you've done this early on, before the next session starts, and hopefully, the word will spread. Go ahead, Debbie.
So thank you, Sam. That was great. And you're kind of our eyes and ears. So to your point, it seems like due to the land shortage and what the town's vision is and what a new developer or landowner's vision is, they're starting to resort to lawfare. So we're seeing more and more cases where the P&Z has rejected an application, the town has rejected an application, and then they sue the town with the knowledge that the town doesn't really have the assets to fight a lawsuit. And then they end up, compromising or, talking about other alternatives, but it's becoming, very legally weaponized now. So I'm glad you're watching this, but they're not done. If they see a parcel that they like and they feel it's the best, and they're going to fight for it and start suing small towns. So we should brace ourselves, and maybe we can discuss what we can do to perhaps be proactive or, just raise awareness.
Thank you for that, Debbie. I actually have lunch plans tomorrow with Johanna Bond of the Middlesex Chamber. I'm going to bring this up with her and urge her to share this with the chambers across the state because what this drove home was that is that if anything, we in this conversation, it can't just be one note, just housing. You know, we can reserve 3% of our land for industry. And you could make arguments that possibly in some places we need more. But the direction of conversion of land from industrial to residential, you know, the example from Denver is, I don't know that's the N of one, but their 16-year experiment was that is that residential with its quicker return of value added from the construction of residential properties, it will outcompete industrial. And because industrial value is not typically the industrial construction, the industrial building, it is what's happening inside. And that's a whole different return structure than residential development. So,
All right. And I would certainly like to see America start to make more things and utilize some of the industrial areas and warehouses that have, you know, been underused. So that might be nice to not turn it into residential if we ever start building things again, making things again.
but yeah, but even if that industrial land is being used for warehousing, which, you know, with everyone buying things online, has exploded across the country. The warehouses operate 24/7. There's truck traffic 24/7. And I don't think anyone would want to live next to that. And when I raised this to the co-chair of planning and development, I'm spacing on the representative's name. Anyway, when I raised that to her, her response was, "Well, they knew when they moved there." And that
Oh,
and
wow.
I said, well, I said like you know, from an equity perspective, you know, a person probably would not knowingly move down next to a noxious use. They're moving next to that use because that's going to be the cheapest housing because it is
Right.
a noxious use.
And they
It
might
is
think
because it's
they might think it's a short one
yeah.
year temporary housing situation. They'll rent while they're looking for something else. So they can live with something for short term, you know, rental.
But if that is what you can afford and that's where you're going to live, you're going to still complain just like anyone else would to town
Yeah.
hall or city hall. So it just the idea here is that sometimes separation of uses is actually a very good thing, and we need to remember that um, because we need workplaces, we need businesses, we need
Yeah.
industry in addition to housing. So
Maybe we can talk about stronger buffer zones or something.
yeah.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Debbie.
Do you
Other
happen,
comments?
I see
yeah,
Marie.
Marie, go
do
ahead.
you happen to know how our state reps voted on this matter?
I don't, but I think that that information is public from the committee votes. So I think it's
Yeah, I
something.
don't mean to beat a dead horse, but
Yeah.
we should make sure that they're behind you and, you know,
Yeah.
supporting the regional and local agendas.
Yeah, and this is and that's sort of my thoughts here with talking to the chamber, trying to just make sure put this on the radar because it's I see Thomas put in a comment about CBIA. I know that CBIA is aware of this, but it was really a huge oversight in looking at our state's economic development documents and at DCD and others where there's no discussion about industrial land, um, and that this is a real concern. It's just completely missing.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
we actually had in a local meeting an industrial leader, so to speak, of a good-sized business object to any kind of rezoning in his area, just specifically exactly what you're saying. For that reason, it was proposed that it might be considered also for residential, and he was smart enough to attend the meeting and speak up in a zoning referral. but
But
it's kind of slipping through the cracks unnoticed.
So Marie,
but
I can give you the information that you requested. It's very simple. If you go on to CGA and type in the bill number, you'll get it.
Okay.
20 voted, 12 yay, 8 nay, 1 abstention. The abstention was Norm Needleman, probably because he owns an industrial facility over in Essex.
Mm.
And the 8 nay were party line. So those were Republicans, and the Democrats voted in favor of the bill.
but
Well, we have a couple of Democrats running in our area for as reps, so it could, potentially be something that they can bring forward.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I mean,
I want to
this
thank
is a
Tom.
very. Go ahead, Sam.
Tom had a number of comments in the chat. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate them. There was a question about uh, and I think the issue, I think the relationship between housing and job growth is not fully, I don't know if it's fully reciprocal, because businesses are locating in places that the states that have housing shortages, and so the availability of housing may be more of an excuse sometimes for a job not locating here. But it hasn't like the lack of cheap housing or available housing in some states like Nevada has not affected their ability to attract businesses. Um, and I'll also point out, Marie, that that business owner in some places, public speaking may be limited to town residents or property owners. So if that and so depending if your business owns the land or you live or the business owner lives in town, they may not even have a chance to even participate. Uh, I don't think that up to the majority of need to understand that.
All right. Other comments or questions for Sam on this discussion regarding this bill 5502?
Yeah.
Debbie, do you have your hand up again?
I do, but I'm willing to let somebody else jump ahead.
Okay. Anyone else?
All right,
Anyone?
go ahead, Debbie.
Oh, okay. So in relation to growth of jobs or loss of jobs, loss of businesses from the state in general, but yet upward demand on housing, it recently came back into my focus that remember with a divorce rate of up to 50%, every time there's a divorce, it doubles the housing need, but the number of workers still remains the same. So unfortunately, high divorce rates put added pressure on the housing market. So just thought I'd throw that back into the mix.
Yeah.
Okay. It's an interesting factor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
sad.
Others wishing to speak? Hearing none. Sam, thank you for the presentation. Thank you for answering the questions of the commission, and we will move on to item number 9, which is Public Act 25-1 update. And we'll start with the Regional Zoning Compliance Update Project. Sam, who you want to take this?
Was Eliza able to make it
I
to
don't
the
see
meeting?
her. I don't see her on.
No, Eliza did send information to me, so I can
Okay.
give you Eliza's update for this
Okay,
evening.
go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Susie.
You're welcome. The consultant IMEG is working with 14 towns. 13, they have completed the work with 13 of them. One they are still working with. They have provided draft language specific to each town for updating their regulations to reflect the summary review process for approving the middle housing, which is 2 to 9 units of housing in commercial zones. IMEG has also provided draft language, shape files, static maps, and draft letters to OPM for the towns that have opted to add in or opted in have opted to add in a conservation and traffic mitigation districts. Sorry, I can say that again if you need me to. That was really muddled.
Okay.
So, okay, I'll say it again. So, IMEG has also provided draft language, shape files, static maps, and draft letters to OPM for the towns that have opted to add in a conservation and traffic mitigation district. So, they're helping with the towns that would like to do that.
Now,
Any questions?
when will that be? When do you think that'll be completed?
I don't know. Eliza didn't give any information on that. We know that the deadline for having the summary review for the middle units in commercial districts was the deadline was July 1. So we have received, and I did check to make sure we had seen Middlefield and Durham, which we had in May. So those have come through. So we've seen a good number of the towns submit their regulation changes, their text amendments, their map amendments. And it looks like our towns are pretty well on track to have it done in early July, if not late July.
Okay. I would be very interested in seeing what the consultants put together. Thank you. Others? We have anything further on this, or that's all the information that we got from Eliza?
Yeah,
That's all I
I think
Okay. All right. Comments or questions from the commission members? Hearing none, we will move on to B, other activities, Regional Housing Committee update.
yeah, that was also Eliza.
I also have a paragraph, unless you want to take it, Sam.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so for Regional Housing Committee and Housing Growth Plan update, the Regional Housing Committee will soon be receiving packages containing a presentation of data on existing housing, demographics, and economic conditions in each town, background data for that presentation, and instructions on how to use the information within the towns, within all your towns. The first three are Chester, Clinton, and Cromwell will be ready this week. Eliza and Megan plan to begin meeting virtually with each representative and the town planner and CEO to talk about next steps, which will include preparing for housing growth plan work. The Regional Housing Committee is about to begin working on updating the existing regional housing needs assessment to include new statutory metrics based on PA 25-1. And that work will continue through the end of the calendar year.
All right. Comments or questions on that? Commission members? No? Okay. Thank you again, Susie.
You're
And
welcome.
C, regional stormwater projects for fiscal year 27.
All right, that will be me. So,
Okay.
so as part of Public Act 25-1, the COGs were provided $400,000 in new funding, $200,000 for housing planning to help implement all the new housing requirements and the housing plans, and then 200,000 was set aside for either a solid waste planning and coordination or stormwater management planning and coordination. In For this fiscal year, which was only a half a year, we spent that money to supplement our regional waste authority study that was already ongoing and already had a consultant on board, and we had them broaden their scope of work, and they're going to be providing some additional deliverables as part of that. For the upcoming fiscal year in 2027, we will be shifting over to doing work on stormwater. In talking to PM, that money can be used in as broadly as we can conceive of stormwater from planning on specific improvements to culverts to zoning updates to minimize stormwater runoff to helping towns comply with their MS4 stormwater permits. They could be used for stormwater quality testing. It could be used for the new mapping requirement that is coming down the pike in 28 for towns to map out their bridges and culverts. So we held a meeting last week where we discussed with first selectmen and public works officials, what was most of interest to them, and And so the big ideas that we kind of came forward with was mapping a stormwater infrastructure. This is these culverts. Mapping a stormwater infrastructure is required for both the MS4 permit, which is the permit that allows the municipalities to discharge stormwater into the state's water bodies. 14 of our 17 towns are under these regulations. The towns that aren't under these regulations is East Haddam, Lyme, and Killingworth. The rest have portions of urbanized area which require this type of mapping. The new Public Act 25-33, which is an act concerning the environment, climate, and sustainable municipal and state planning, and the use of neonicotinoids and second generation anticoagulant rodenticides. In that bill, in that public act, municipalities are required to map bridges and culverts. That's due in the spring of 2028. In discussions, because the standards of what the state wants mapped and what size of culverts, what diameter, what all these different things are not yet known. It seems a little premature to proceed on that because we don't want to do it the wrong way. And we have more time on that for 2028. But there is work to be done there. And there is also work for the MS4 for the majority of towns. Another element of the MS4 permit is water quality testing. This is something that we could put a contract out for either potentially for a consultant to do, or our health districts may actually be able to assist here. Um, uh, and so looking into that and using some of that money for that. And then the third item was illicit discharge detection mitigation, and that is also part of stormwater, is trying to look for illicit dumping that shouldn't be there.
So,
Yeah, go ahead, Frank.
Sam, I just want to say something while we're on the subject of testing water for water quality.
Yeah,
There's a federal standard for doing this. It is so onerous. Um, we want to make sure that if we go down this road and towns have to do anything with this, that we come up with reasonable standards for doing that testing. I will give you the examples. Within 30 minutes after a rainfall event ends, somebody has to go down and take a sample of the sewer water. That could be in the middle of the night. That could be on a weekend. That could be after a storm and before another storm's going to come shortly thereafter. It's crazy
yeah,
because I know people that have done it. Whether a consultant does it and charges the region or the town does it, or the local health department does it, this is an enormous process. It seems like
yeah,
it's a little thing. We're just going to test some water. No, not if it follows what is the current process. So it is important that if this moves forward, that everybody is aware that we don't want to do it that way. We need to come up with some reasonable, maybe you test it once a month and that's good, but not after every rain event, or monthly after a rain event is another way they word it. Maybe this is something that should be done annually, and that's fine. But I
yeah.
just want to make sure that everyone is aware of that is expensive.
Yeah, and also we asked the more general question from OPM, like, could this money be used on training? Could this money be used on, like, let's say, other training for planning and zoning commissioners, for staff, for and because the language in the Public Act 25-1 is so broad, there's really no guidance there. So OPM said, like, as long as it's related to stormwater, we're good with it. So. And what I reminded in discussions with Margot and in discussions with the attendees of our meeting last week, I reminded them that this is intended to be a puzzle. So we can work our way up to something bigger. And we don't, just because we decide this fiscal year we're not going to do one of these projects doesn't mean that later on we can't. So that's something which we are going to be working on. We're going to be bringing this up at our COG meeting on Wednesday, and looking and just looking to see just some guidance from the towns of how we can best support them on this. But thank you, Frank. The testing is concerning about how it's done, when it's done, how often it's done, and how could anyone comply with that to
Yeah,
that level.
I'm intimately familiar because my wife has to do it or had to do it. She retired. And it is
Okay.
unbelievable. Middle of the night, rainstorm, whatever the heck. I got to go take a sample of the drain. What?
Yeah. So
All right. Anything
that's
further on that one?
that's that.
Questions? Questions for Sam? Comments? Okay. Thank you again, Sam. And
You're
we
welcome.
will move on to item number 10, miscellaneous state, regional, and/or local planning issues. Um, who would like to start letting us know maybe what they're working on or where they are in the process? Go ahead, Howard. Floor
Uh,
is yours.
I just wanted to let you know that in Old Lyme, we have separate planning, zoning, affordable housing, and we formed a committee of two from each to work on the P25 one so that we are coordinating and hopefully cooperating in the process rather than just do it in silos. So we've started that committee. It has a very lofty title called the Housing Strategic Planning Steering Committee, but that's what it is. And our first select woman sits in on that too.
Great. Okay. Questions or comments for Howard? Thank you, Howard. All right. Any others?
Oh,
Stephanie, please go ahead. Did you have your hand up? No.
No, I didn't. I'm
All right.
very much appreciating everything everybody is saying tonight.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm sorry. I thought you might have had your hand up. All right. Any others? No? Okay.
All right.
Well, that's great. Sam, anything you want to add before we close?
Just I saw in the chat that someone asked for my PowerPoint. I can get that sent out to you, plus a link to the relevant pages of the Denver zoning code.
All right. Thank you
Great.
very much for doing that. And if that's the case, a motion to adjourn would be in order. Thank you, Bill. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Beth. All right. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Bye.
Opposed?
Good night, everybody.
Abstaining? I declare the motion passed. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and stay safe.
Have a
Thanks,
good
Sam
night.
and Susie.
Thank you.
Good night.
Yeah,
Take care.
great.
Sam.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Great job, guys. Yeah, bye-bye.